Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm a Vedic astrologer of some roughly 34 years experience now, and I'm happy to be talking with you about Vedic astrology, what it does, um, how it works, and also how it affects how it's reflected in the world around us. I've been doing these broadcasts for cable television in New Bedford about the past, I think since around 2019, so for about the past 5 years, maybe a little bit earlier. So I'm here to educate you a little bit on what's happening astrologically in the sky, what we can expect over the next week and months, and also to give you an update on where things are happening and also what to expect in your chart for this week. So I do, in fact, do readings, and I do teach students. You can contact me for rates. I can't advertise rates on if I'm on cable TV. Something I absolutely cannot do. But I do accept students. You can talk with me, and we can work out a situation that works best for you. Also, Crystal Expectations, our store, which had been closed for renovations for a few years, and it took longer than expected for a variety of reasons. We'll be reopening shortly, certainly before the end of July. So you can contact me down there. The number at the store is 508-990-7898. You can leave a message. If you want to contact me directly, you can reach me at 508-525-0001. You can text me at that message as well, at that phone number, as well. You can only leave a voicemail at the store number. So it looks like the closed captioning didn't record my direct phone all that well. So again, my direct phone number is 508-525-0001. And you can also email me at either neivas@comcast.net, or you can email me at Gary Gomes, that's Gary Gomes plus the letter G, at gmail.com. Okay. So we do have some interesting guests which will show up on the show shortly. I'm trying to help organize a conference for Saptarishi Astrology. I'm not doing much, just reaching out to a few astrologers and trying to see if I can get the scheduling right. But the Saptarishi Astrology Conference is a long astrology conference. It's very, very inexpensive to attend. I recommend it. You can get exposed to a lot of astrologers from India and around the world. And you can go to saptarishi.com for details, or you can contact me either through text or email, and I'd be happy to direct you to the site. Also, if you're interested, I will have astrologers as guests over the next few months. If you're interested in appearing on the show, I've been a little lax in getting back to some people who have expressed interest, and to them I apologize, but I will be actually moving in that direction really, really soon. And no more excuses. It's time to move. And so come heck or high water, or because I don't think I can swear, uh, whatever happens, that will actually be done. Plus some book reviews, plus some interviews already taped, will be broadcast and put up on this channel on YouTube. So that's the long advertisement. We're going to get right into the chart right now, and I'm going to share the chart with you in a couple of seconds. Also, it probably goes without saying, if you like the page, even if you don't like the page, but you think it's tolerable and you'd like to make some suggestions, please do subscribe, and you can contact me directly through either of those contact information points I gave you, or on the YouTube response. Again, we're trying to get the subscriber numbers up so the actual this can produce some small revenue, and I will work towards a Patreon page, but that'll come in due time. The other thing is, if you share, if you like, I've been told it helps the algorithm for the channel. I don't know if, because of what I've said before, I've gotten in trouble with anybody. That's kind of unknown until we get to the actual point of going for commercial matters. So I am hoping to make some money off this, but that's not the primary reason I'm on. The primary reason is to share information with you, and also to bring a little bit of knowledge into your life, knowledge about what's happening and what's happening in the world. So that's why I do the maps, so we can get an idea where dangerous spots are and also interesting spots are. Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about just briefly is, and again, this is something which I probably talk about too much but it's a specific interest of mine, is essentially the politics of what's happening right now. So it's an election season. You're going to see a lot of, and it's an election season not only here, but pretty much around the world. So if we look at this map, we don't have, so the truth planets usually are Jupiter and Venus. Now, Venus has been combust for the past few weeks. So we're going to see, so there are a lot of ways the truth can get distorted in a Vedic chart. And there is an interaction, if you look closely from this chart, between Sun, Venus, and Mercury. So essentially, we're seeing a lot of activity overseas, especially in terms of conservative parties having large impacts, some out and out winning elections, some out and out, or some gaining substantial minorities. Now, I think one of the things you have to keep in mind is that these are not, because they're conservative, doesn't mean they're evil. I guess that's really the best way I can say it. A lot of countries have fallen under a lot of pressure because of immigration, because of COVID, the aftermath of COVID, and also restrictions on who they can trade with, especially in Europe. That affects the global economy. Some countries have been working at very high levels of, so I'll just use one which is, I think it's pretty non-controversial. Venezuela has essentially been spending a great deal, and it's been cutting back on its oil production. So I think one of the things that happens when you have a source of revenue taken away and you keep on spending is you start overspending and you start putting pressure on the economy. So I know about that particular case just because of what I keep in contact with and who I pay attention to. And also I was a history major for a brief while, but I don't think I ever told anyone this. My concentration was Latin American Latin American studies. So it's a part of the world I'm really interested in. So I keep track of that particular part of the world more assiduously than let's say your typical person would. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But if we look carefully at this chart, you have, there's a combination in Vedic astrology where you have Venus is in Mercury's line, Mercury's in its own sign, it's really close to the sun. Both planets are combust, so we're not getting full, accurate information out. Jupiter's in Venus's sign, the ruler of Jupiter is weak. Okay, so that means Venus is weak, so Taurus rules Venus. And Mars is also aspecting Libra. So there's not a direct connection between Mars and Venus, but Mars is also essentially affecting a sign that's really heavily influenced by Libra. And Venus is in the ninth house. That's a good position. It's good. This is one of the reasons why we're seeing artificial intelligence in the spotlight so much, because essentially Venus and Mercury sort of co-rule computers. As a matter of fact, Venus, I think, actually is more connected with computers than Mercury is. And it's mainly because Venus is a teaching planet, and it likes technology. It likes things that grow on their own. Jupiter is also in the ninth house in this chart we're looking at right now. But we do have a combination for misrepresentation because the moon and Ketu are in the first house. Mars is aspecting the second house of speech. So just because we don't have the stereotypical combinations of, and Saturn's also aspecting Mars, so it's being used to control behavior. And this is true not only of parties on, it's true of parties on basically any side of the political spectrum. This isn't a uniquely left or right wing phenomenon. So both parties or both sides of the political spectrum, to me, are starting to show what I would call absolutist tendencies. That is, if you don't, so again, the potential for compromise is not good. This filters through into the Ukraine-Russia conflict. This filters into the Israeli-Hamas situation. This filters into other situations like we have in the United States, where people will. So a lot of issues are being brought up again about who lied when about the election in the past and who told the truth about events 4 years ago. And I think, interestingly, we have a Saturn-Rahu combination coming up, not right away. This is about a year in the future. I'll give you a more precise date. But the Saturn-Rahu combination does tend to shift things. And from what I've seen, the past two occurrences I can recall, um, it tended to shift things to the right. So this was in 1992 or 1990, 1994, excuse me. That was when Congress in the United States became um, more dominated by conservative Republicans. 2015 to 2016 was also a Saturn Rahu conjunction in Libra. And I haven't gone back further than that to look at it in more detail. I'm going to do that this coming week. But basically, Saturn Rahu combinations do tend to make things a little bit more. Saturn's inherently a conservative planet, or it's a planet which focuses on the economy. It's not really a generous planet. It focuses on people wanting to not take chances as much. But the Rahu and Pisces combination, which will be there really until the end of 2024, tends to make people more emotional about changes and more emotional about reform. So I think you're going to see a big clash around the end of 2024, a big cultural clash around the end of 2024. And it won't be localized to the United States, it'll be global. This was also around the time that various governments were going through reformations. This was post the collapse of Russia, was in 1992. And Russia tried a different premier or a different leader than Putin in 2007. I think it was in 2017, I'm not sure. And that essentially he decided he has to take back power around that time. So I think one of the things that you'll see is I'm fairly good at anticipating reactions to reform. That's one of the things that I've typically been good at even before I was an astrologer. It doesn't mean I'm right all the time, but I have been right more often than I've been wrong. And so regardless of who becomes president in the United States, you're going to see that kind of like slip backwards, what I would call a slip backwards action. But it won't be, there'll still be, you can never turn the clock back completely. You can never turn the clock back to the way it was 10 years ago. So I think this will be an interesting period of conflict, especially around the end of 2024 for the United States. And there is a massive conjunction coming up in 2029, which I haven't spoken about. A friend of mine sent it to me a few years ago, or maybe about a year ago, and I still haven't examined it properly. But I'm not necessarily worried about things like that. I'm not necessarily looking for the end of human civilization in any of these charts or even major shifts in power. But we will hit a few crises points between now and 2020, roughly between 2026 and 2035, which should be interesting to look at. But again, will things fall completely apart? I think that's kind of like the melodramatic thing that astrologers tend to dwell too much on. Essentially, even after major changes have occurred, there is pushback, and people try to live the lives they've lived before. So even though certainly you know our security standards changed after 9/11, and certainly our awareness of disease escalated after the pandemic, I still see people pretty much running their lives not radically different from the way they ran them before. It's only certain special access points that are overall affected. So people try to have people tend towards normalcy. They live life a certain way for so many years. They tend to gravitate towards the life they've lived. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger issues, both facing the ecology, or not the ecology, excuse me, the climate change movement, and also one of the big issues facing energy conservation issues, and also facing political partnerships. So I think you have major changes coming in Europe, definitely. You'll see some major changes, but not as dramatic in the United States, I don't think. Because essentially we're kind of spread out. The political pockets are there's enough room over here for the political pockets to stay out of each other's way to a very large extent. Europe is a little bit less. They're a little bit more clustered together. Okay. So, but basically, let's just look at the chart specifically. Rahu's in the 7th house. Moon is with Ketu in the 11th house. Some worry about money. So we are seeing some signs that inflation is lowering, but that's illusory. And the reason I say it's illusory is because it's temporary, number one. Number two, it's based upon an already expanding floor. So essentially the inflation rate has been high for the level of inflation was extremely high in 2022 and 2023. The fact that we're leveling off right now doesn't make those prices go down. It just means they're not going up by as much. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. I'm not blaming anybody. I think this was actually an inevitable result of the pandemic, like the 1970s. Inflation was an inevitable result of oil shortages that happened in the United States and around the world. But the policies that were used to combat those particular situations made the inflation a bit worse. They didn't really help it. They actually made it a bit worse. So it was interesting to me that that people look and say, well, these policies didn't hurt inflation. It's because of global markets, and that's true. Global markets is true in part because of greed. Okay, so once people are given license to raise prices, you know what? They're going to raise prices. But I think that's also a failure of the government, because the government doesn't insert themselves and say, well, this is unfair to consumers. You double your profit margins. On things like groceries, profit margins are already low. They're already pretty tiny. So if you're talking about doubling profit margins, you're going up to like 1 to 3% to maybe 5 to 7%. And that's not it's an increase in profit margins for them, but it's not and it's a bit insensitive, certainly, but it's not really like what I would call a massive shift upward. This is just my opinion. It's not. I'm not an economist, nor do I pretend to be one. But we do have some hope with this chart, with the sun entering this sign and heading towards its own sign of Leo, that things will get a little bit better. But I am worried about manipulation by government because of the sun entering this sign, and manipulations of communications by a variety of people. So I was watching a discussion of an event that happened in a few years ago, and prospectually, depending on the perspective you took, both sides were telling the truth. But in terms of detail, they left out certain important facts. So that's what you're going to see happening. So if you see negative things about either side and they're getting you angry, try to scale it back a little bit and do a little bit more research as to what was actually said by the actual person, what the record shows that the actual person did, and then try to draw a line, okay? Because it's been really, really tough to get an honest, balanced report on the news since at least 2016, and I would say even a lot earlier. And that's because of the nature of politics. So it's just, just be careful not to get tanked up about things that you think are true because you're being told us on news outlets, whichever news outlet you watch, and be a little bit more discriminative about what you accept to be true and what you feel is true and what actually is true, because the three are often very different things. Jupiter's aspecting the moon, that's good, but it will also increase public opinion and make it a little more critical than it has been. A lot of the activity does favor conservative branches. There are certain things happening. So Macron held snap elections. He's gambling that he can. In France, he's gambling that he overturns the gains that were made by Le Pen's party in the European Parliament. I'm not sure he can, but he's a very clever politician, so he might be able to and keep his coalition in power. But the odds look like they're against him at this particular point in time. But Paris is the largest voting bloc. Paris tends to be liberal. So the cities, so it's essentially the same scenario as we're seeing in the United States. The cities tend to be more liberal, more generous, more willing to share resources. The farms and the working classes in the countries in question are, to a very large extent, suffering. They're not getting. They're paying I think 3 to 4 times as much for energy as they were before. As this is especially true in France and Germany. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in England because There is interest in rejoining the European Union, but I'm not sure it's the best time to do that, given basically how disorganized the European Union appears to be right now. But that's their business. And so we're looking at the Moon K2 combination right now. It'll be very confusing in terms of, so Moon is in Hasta Nakshatra, K2 is in Hasta Nakshatra. That has to do with the hands, but it's also a very strong communication nakshatra. So again, prepare yourself for a slew of lies over the next few months. Jupiter aspecting it will make it seem like the truth. And Jupiter's in a fixed sign, so nobody's going to change their position really until next spring. But I have found it interesting that certain networks and certain media outlets have changed management, have changed direction because they're losing money, like the Washington Post situation. So that's a big media outlet, went from like 2 million subscribers to about half a million subscribers in the period of a couple of years, and that's a massive drop, and that's why they changed their personnel around. So you're going to see big changes in media over the next few months, and you'll see both sides. You'll see media. Media is in the United States is very important, and also this Sun, Venus, Mercury combination is causing some problems in terms of what people view as being sellable or communicable, and Jupiter is tending towards a more conservative posture in Taurus. Okay, so again, Mars is in Aries, so everybody wants to fight. Saturn is in its own sign, Mars is in its own sign, and Mercury is in its own sign. So communications, people will be friendlier communicationally with Mercury in its own sign. But Saturn and Mars, people will want everything perfect. That's a little bit difficult for people across the world. So if we're looking at more water catastrophes or more water problems, more water or transportation driven problems because of the moon with K2. We're looking for some air problems because of Saturn aspecting Mars, and some more caution in investing because of Jupiter in this particular sign. Now, one of the interesting things is, I think within about a month's time, when Mars and Jupiter come together, the economy will actually start to go up rather dramatically, but then it'll start to slide a bit, I would say in August. So again, I think this is something, and it's already showing signs of sliding, to be honest. So again, just watch out financially over the next 6 months. It's going to be kind of a bumpy period. And in terms of election results, I'm not going to say anything. I've already said what I've said in terms of election results. So let's look at the individual charts. The country that I think is more the country I look at, given the astrology of their charts, I look at China carefully. I look at Japan carefully. And I look at Korea and Iran carefully over the next few months. And it's not because they're enemies of the United States or anything like that, but this Mars is badly placed for them. So in terms of their birth charts. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully I'm wrong about those countries. So let's go over to the individual charts and see how the individual charts. So I'm going to kind of speed my way through this because I spent too much time up front. Mars is in the first house for Aries, so that makes the sign super confident, but also feeling constrained and wants to get everything perfect. Jupiter in the second house brings more money and more diplomatic control for this particular sign. Moon is in the sixth house, so there'll be some worries or some needs for home repairs. Saturn's in the 11th, that gives slow gains. Rahu's in the 12th, expenses. For Taurus, this is May 16th to June 16th. Jupiter's in the first house. Some problems with relationship life because Mars is aspecting the seventh house. And but again, some increased potential for wealth for this sign. Some problems with kids, so kids will be a little bit moody or difficult to deal with. And if we look over here, a lot of focus on career life, a lot of gains, but they won't last long. And again, a lot of expenses because of Mars being in the 12th house, mainly because of relationship partners. For Gemini, this is June 15th, roughly to July 15th. Sun is with Venus and Mercury, so this sign will feel brighter or happier, but it'll still feel a lot of pressure to fulfill its desires or ambitions, a lot of desire to get out there, a lot of desire to make more money because it has been spending money. Relationship life is difficult or is hidden away, basically, from this chart. They'll get more help from overseas than it will from local. Money is still kind of problematic, but that'll only be for a couple of days for this sign. And family life is a little bit disconnected. Saturn's in the ninth house, so again, there is struggle for success, but it will come. Rahu's in the 10th house, it gives fame. Mars is in the 11th house, it gives gain of new friends and new aggressive friends. Jupiter, again, we're spending too much on education and too much on image, I think. For Moon, for Cancer, the Lord of the first house is in the third along with Ketu. So this sign will feel a little bit directionless this month. This is July 15th to August 15th. And people with prominent cancers will also feel a little bit depressed, to be honest with you, just because the Moon Ketu conjunction is so close right now. Saturn is in the 8th house, but it will feel like there's a lot of new opportunities opening up. So that's the positive thing. Saturn is in the 8th house. That indicates a reformation or a reconfiguration of life. Rahu is in the 9th house. So that gives temporary luck. Mars is a great planet for the sign. It's in the 10th house of career. And so Rahu's in the 9th, Mars is in the 10th house of career. This gives more dynamism, more activity connected with career. Jupiter's in the 11th, more gains, but again, we're spending too much money in this sign, mainly on image, and also to keep ahead of everybody else. For Leo has Sun in the 11th house. This is actually a good placement. With Venus and Mercury, it gives financial growth, new friendships. Moon is with Ketu, the sign will seem to be a little bit withdrawn or isolated. Saturn's in the 7th house, so not really much happening relationship-wise, not much change, although there is stress for Leos because of this sign placement in relationship life. And relationship partners will seem very difficult to please. Mars is in the 9th house. This is, again, a very good placement for this chart. Mars is the best planet for Cancer and Leo, and it's well placed in the 9th house. So through individual effort, through individual energy, this sign will actually get good teaching opportunities and good financial opportunities. So that shows well for Leo. For Virgo, Moon is in the 1st house along with Ketu. makes this sign a little bit moody, a little bit unsure of itself. K2 is really almost at maximum strength. And this is something I'll draw attention to you. K2 in this particular sign is stationary direct. That happens once every few weeks. And essentially the stationary direct is like a retrograde for the lunar nodes. I use it a lot because it tends to work. So this actually opens up new areas of exploration. It opens up new opportunities. K2 gives rather than receives, or it gives rather than takes away. There may be a feeling of like a little bit of uncertainty as to which path to pursue, but basically for Virgo, this is actually a good path for at least momentarily over a couple of days. And relationship life will seem to be a little bit calmer because of Rahu being in the seventh house, not retrograde anymore. Career-wise, overall, a good month, a good week and month for this sign because of Sun, Venus, and Mercury being in the 10th house. Jupiter's in the 9th. That's a good combination for this chart too. Mars is in the 8th. This is the only drawback to this chart. So a lot of the desires this house, this sign is pursuing, may get pushed back. Saturn will make it run out of energy pretty quickly, but it'll also make it determined to succeed. But overall, not a bad week for Virgo, given how it's been typically not really that great a year. For Libra, Libra has Mars in the 7th house, so there'll be increasing arguments or with relationship partners, but it also gives a sign a certain amount of power. Jupiter's in the 8th. It gives unexpected benefits or unexpected rewards. And Sun, Venus, Mercury in the 9th house will give unexpected gains. So that's good. So this chart showing some improvement for Libra. Saturn's in the 5th house. That's actually a good placement for Libra rising. Any past efforts you put forward will be rewarded. Rahu's in the 6th house, so there will be continuing concerns with mechanical devices like cars. So basically not a bad week for Libra. Scorpio has Jupiter in the 7th house. This is November 15th through December 15th. And it has a lot of planets in the 8th house. So this will make spouses or relationship partners overly optimistic. They'll spend a lot of money, but they'll also bring a lot of money in. And there'll also be some arguments. This sign will feel like it has to work a great deal and everything has to be perfect for it to achieve its results this year. Rahu in the 5th house, children are a little bit more manageable with Rahu direct, and relationship life will be a little bit better this particular week. For Sagittarius has Saturn in the 3rd house, Mars in the 5th. So children will be very ambitious, very driven, but a little bit hesitant to take chances. Rahu's in the 4th house, generally dissatisfaction with relationship life or with home life from this combination. Sagittarius will get a lot of chances to communicate and also to cheat, to be honest with you, if it wishes to do so. I wouldn't advise it. But if you're a single Sagittarius, it's a good week to meet people. Jupiter's in the 6th house. The Lord of the First is in the 6th, so a lot of effort is connected with the chart. And career life is a source of worry. There's a fear that people with this combination will be unrecognized or passed over for promotion in career. It's unjustified, but it is there. For Capricorn has Saturn in the 2nd house, good for acquisition of wealth, but through careful means. You have Jupiter in the 5th house, good luck in the speculative markets, or you're in AI or Bitcoin, probably a good week for you. But I'm a little bit gun shy about Bitcoin. I'm really not really that big a fan. I'm going to be quite truthful with you. And and that's for a variety of reasons. I just see it as being not necessarily valueless, but sort of like just erratic in terms of its market potential. That's just me. Rahu's in the third house. So this sign will be very ambitious this month. Sun, Venus, Mercury are in the sixth house. Not the best placement for luck, but with hard work, you can overcome almost anything. Moon is in the ninth house, along with case of unexpected chances to make money. So actually, it's a good month for speculation or a good week for speculation for Capricorn. Saturn is in the first house for Aquarius. It can make this sign a little bit dictatorial or a little bit ambitious for power. Saturn in Aquarius is one of those kind of unusual combinations in that it really doesn't share secrets, but it is actually, it passed through the sign of Varuna, who is a deposed king and is entering, it's in Purvabhadrapada Nakshatra, which is really a sign for reclaiming power or authority. So people who've been deposed, people who have been hurt previously, they'll regain some strength. It will make Aquarians themselves a little bit lazier, and they'll sleep in a little bit more. Rahu's in the second house, so there's a lot of demand. So this sign is going to be very vocal, very is going to speak a lot. Mars is in the third house, very ambitious. We have Jupiter in the fourth house, so home life will actually expand, although it may be a little bit too optimistic at this time. Luck will be good. This sign is really driven to study a great deal from this particular chart and also look at behind the scenes influences. So it'll be looking at conspiracy theories and things like that. Okay. For Pisces, finally, Rahu's in the first house. Some dissatisfaction with the relationship life. Again, if you can make it to the end of 2024 in a relationship, stick it out, because I'm generally telling people not to get divorced during this transit. Mars is in the second house, a lot of arguments at home. Jupiter's in the third house, a lot of desire for security and stability. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are in the fourth house, and Mercury's in what's called the Vajra Yoga, so it's a good opportunity for learning. Moon is in the seventh house, so relationship partners will be erratic or a little bit, or very, very critical. And Saturn's in the 12th, so too many expenditures for this chart. So expenses seems to be a recurring theme in the chart. No less than half the chart is affected by heavy expenditures. As a matter of fact, more than that. I would say about 8 signs are. So it's pretty, so it's a good idea not to be reckless in your spending. So let's look at the astro map. All right. And so we do have some contested issues or some political scandals showing up, or public scandals showing up in Hawaii, maybe some fears of flooding or volcanoes because of that particular Rahu moon line over here, maybe even some flooding in Alaska. Mars is hitting the west coast of Canada, so this may be a potential area for wounds or fights. Mars and Jupiter encompass California and essentially Nebraska. I'm sorry, North Dakota, South Dakota. It has North Dakota, South Dakota, and the western part of Texas and all the way down through Mexico. Now, Mexico just elected its first female president, but there were an astounding number of murders in the Mexican election. So this looks like an opportunity to establish law and order, or courts, or maybe even make Mexico more law a safer country than it has been. And it's interesting in that I was reading an article that Michigan, it was Michigan, Pennsylvania. So some people were revisiting the election fraud claims in some states. I don't know how true, how accurate that information is, but that's popping up again in the news. And I don't know whether or not they have some evidence, more cogent evidence than they have before. But it's interesting because this entire region, like between Ohio and roughly Wisconsin, is in between Saturn and the sun. So there is definitely going to be some contesting of the government's elections or the government's rule. Yeah, we have a Sun, Mercury, Venus conjunction happening over Pennsylvania, Western New York, and all the way down into West Virginia, down into North and South Carolina, down into Florida. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit again. And also down into Panama. So this region right here, looks like there's going to be a lot of political contention as far as I can see. And also countries like Venezuela, also some danger of some natural catastrophes in Guyana and down through Western Brazil and down through Bolivia and down through Argentina. So I think one of the things I would watch out for is there'll be a potential for restrictions in these governments over here, Peru, Ecuador, and also potential for lies coming out of Argentina, and also I would say Eastern United States, because of the Moon K2 conjunction. Mars is passing over Eastern Brazil, and that's interesting to me because it looks like Mars is in kind of a fighting mode. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if these are the Falklands or not down here, but I think they are. So I don't know if there's going to be another conflict over the Falklands, which would be weird. There's a Saturn line running through France right now. It's intersecting with I have to figure out what this line is here. Hold on a second, folks. With a Jupiter line. So when Saturn and Jupiter come together, it's either going to be an unexpected uprising or overturn, and a lot of accepted policies will be turned on their head. It's coming close to England. It's hitting Spain. It's hitting all through Algeria here, and all the way down into through Niger and through Gabon down here. And we're seeing these Sun, Mercury, Venus lines intersecting a Moon K2 line. So there should be some scandal or some disruption in Eastern Europe, around Finland, all the way down through Bulgaria and down into Egypt, down into Sudan. And I'm looking for Israel again. Nothing down here in Israel. Um, but they're having them between Mars and Rahu. So, and also the sun's affecting them a little bit. So that looks like stalemate again to me. Ukraine looks like stalemate again to me. But again, like I said, I think, to be honest with you, I think the war is pretty much over. I know they're still fighting, but that's just, I, I don't know. I just can't, you know, miracles happen. Ukraine may turn back Russia, but I don't know. It just doesn't look like it. The other thing down here is, and I should mention it as well, there are Russian warships around Cuba. So this is definitely an intimidation tactic. And there's a Saturn line. So um, I am concerned because this is sort of like a parallel to it's not really identical to the Cuban Missile Crisis, but uh, it's there have been warnings from Russia that this is going about as far as they're willing to take. So I don't think they're going to fire anything in the United States, but crazier things have happened. But I don't think that's going to happen. There's a Jupiter line going through India that indicates a return to established power of the current administration, but it is shakier than normal. There's a Saturn line running right through uh, Myanmar and through China and all the way up into central Russia, and Saturn kind of dominates this set of lines. So this indicates increased restrictions on the parts of governments in this part of the world. Lies coming out of uh, Borneo, China, Australia. Australia just lost a case to Elon Musk, in which Musk, uh, Australia was trying to prevent X from broadcasting a killing that took place in Australia, but essentially he wanted it censored around the world, and that was just weird. There's a Mars line going all the way down to Tasmania and through Guinea, and so there'll be some arguments down here, a lot of political arguments down here. And finally, nothing's hitting New Zealand for the first time in a while, but I think it's between a Jupiter and Mars line. So again, there will be some dispute over power. And Japan is right next to a Mars line, and Korea has a Mars line running right through Korea, as I said at the beginning of the broadcast. So I think I would keep my eye on Korea over the next few weeks. All right, so that's it for this week. Again, every problem represents an opportunity. Don't be discouraged by what I'm telling you. This is everything is transitory. Okay. I love you all. Hang in there. There are always good opportunities for you to make yourself known or to do what you like to do and to make money and to be happy. Okay. So don't worry. Even in the worst of situations, those opportunities exist. Okay. All right. God bless you all. I love you all. And thank you so much for watching. See you soon.